and you can all hear me okay. So yeah, as Chris said, my name's John Ritchie. I'm an engineer, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how I became an engineer and what I do as my job, so that you can hopefully understand engineering a little bit better. But I'm going to take you back a few years to oh, hang on. Let's see. There we go. Take you back a few years to when I was at primary school. So this is my primary school here, is Lothermere Primary, and this is actually me here playing for the football team, a little bit younger then. And at this time, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a job. I didn't really have too much exposure to different types of work, and particularly didn't really know what engineers did, I don't suppose. But even at primary school, I knew that the subjects I liked were science, and I was pretty good at maths as well. Moving on to secondary school. This was it's a particularly boring picture of the school, but I couldn't find a better picture. But by now I had a slightly better idea of what engineers did. Careers advisors at schools maybe helped it, and just having done a little bit of work experience. But I still didn't really have a completely full idea of what it meant. But I still like maths and science. I also liked computer studies, and well, it was called graphic communication, and basically it was drawing pictures like this. But what I started to realise at secondary school was really that there's lots of different kinds of engineering, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. So some of the different types of engineering that you get electrical engineers. Now they might look at things like how you make mobile phones and computers. You get civil engineers who tend to look at really big structures, buildings, roads, bridges, tunnels, that sort of thing. You get manufacturing engineers who look at how things are actually made, so production lines and robots. And mechanical engineers who look at all sorts of the mechanisms behind all sorts of things, from small pair of scissors to a huge oil rig. And yeah, through secondary school, I think I decided that civil engineering was probably what I wanted to do. The idea of building big structures seemed really quite appealing. But actually, in my final year of school, when I was looking at different universities for what I'd like to do, I actually changed my mind and instead decided to choose a bit of a combination. It was a bit of electrical, a bit of manufacturing, a bit of mechanical, and a bit of design. And I think this is one of the really good things about engineering, is that there's actually a huge variety of things you can do as an engineer. And it's possible to do more than one type. You don't just get stuck in one type of engineering. So I can show you some of the jobs I've done over the last few years and give you a bit more of a flavour of what they are. So after finishing at school, I spent another 5 years studying at university. And this was University of Strathclyde in Glasgow. Now, it's quite common for engineers to study at university and do maybe 3, 4 or 5 more years of studying. But it's also possible to go straight from school into an engineering job, and plenty of people do that too. Now, while I was at university studying there, I got my first taste of proper engineering work with a work experience placement with Ford, Ford the Motor Company. Now, one of the things that I did there was looking at, well, it was a brand new car at the time, the Ford Cougar, and I had to do things like check the engine wouldn't get too hot while you're driving around, or the bits of the car wouldn't fall off. A completely different type of project I had to do looked at one of the factories where they made the engines for the cars. And I had to try and work out how much it cost to make different combinations of engines. So how much more did it cost the factory to make 2 engines rather than just one? Now, maybe it doesn't sound like very much, but actually it might have cost several £million. So it was actually really quite an important thing to know. And these placements really gave me a flavour for engineering, and a taste for it, and it was definitely something I wanted to carry on doing. So when I finished at university, my first proper job was working for a company called Case New Holland, and this was as a mechanical engineer. Now, Case New Holland make tractors like this one here, and the office I worked in probably looked a little bit like this. There were about 60 people like me, all working in an office, all doing similar jobs. And fortunately, though, there was also the factory where they actually made the tractors as well, and that was right next door, so I could wander down to the factory at any point if I wanted. Now, all of us in that office of 60 or so people had different parts of the tractor to design. My main part was the rear mudguard. Now, it might sound strange to think that I spent all day, every day, just designing a mudguard, but I had to think about all sorts of different things. I had to think about the shape of it, make sure that it didn't hit the wheel or other parts of the tractor. I had to make sure it kept the mud off the tractor, which is very important for something driving in muddy fields. I had to think about the material it was made from, and even how it was made. And at one point, I even had to buy the tools that would be used to make it, which cost about £500,000. I didn't buy them myself, obviously. After working there a few years, I moved to a different company called Blair's. Now, Blair's made windows and doors. And this time, instead of being a mechanical engineer or a design engineer, I was actually looking at the manufacturing, looking at the windows were actually made. So the factory looked a bit like this, and they make around about 150 different windows every day. Now, I had to decide which machines would be used to make the windows, how to best put them inside the factory, how to lay them out inside the building. The company wanted to make as many windows as possible and also make them as cheaply as possible, because that was how they would make some money. And if I could save a little bit of money on each window made by making it quickly or a little bit more cheaply, then that would mean they could maybe pay me more money too. But for the last 10 years, I've worked for a company called 4C Design. That's where I am now. And I'm back to being a design engineer. And 4C are much smaller than the other companies I've worked for. And the other thing that's different is that we don't actually make things. The other place made tractors, made windows. 4C don't actually make things at all, but instead help other companies. So where I work, we have a small open plan office where I can either work as part of a group or work on my own. And we've also got a workshop, which is actually where I'm sitting at the moment, and where we can build and test things. So the sort of thing we might get asked to do is we had one person come to us and say they needed help to build an electric bike. That's what they wanted to do. They wanted to be able to sell electric bikes, but they didn't really know how to make them, how they would go together, what parts to use. So my job was to try and as an engineer, my job was to try and figure this out. So the sorts of things I had to do, well, I had to think how the parts might work. So this is an electric bike. There's a motor, some gears, but there's also the pedals that you would work, how they all work together. We had to build prototypes and test it. So here you can see me pedaling a bike that's got the motor on there just to see if it would actually work. I had to start drawing it up using a computer, see how the parts would all fit together. You can see here there's batteries, motors, gears, all inside the bike frame. And then I had to really draw all the parts in a lot of detail so we could decide what would be made from and how we could make them. And then actually get the bits made as well. So sometimes we make parts ourselves in our own workshop, and sometimes we get other people with specialist machines to do them. But in the end, we managed to make this bike, and this was the very first one that was made, and it showed how the electric bike would work and how it would all go together. Now, we only made one just to hand over to the person, but from that, he's been able to show it to other people and has begun trying to sell. But unfortunately, I get to work on lots of different things. So some of the other projects I've got to work on, this one here's for renewable energy. It's actually a device that converts wave energy into electrical energy. And this is a prototype that was tested on Loch Ness. And you can see here that it sits in the water as the waves hit it. It moves air inside it, and that's how the electricity is made. On this occasion, we weren't asked to think about how the things work, but rather how they looked. So these are some speakers, and yeah, instead of how they actually work themselves, that what the company who asked us to work in these said was, you know, what they should look like, what materials they should be made from, how big they should be, what shape they should be, colors, that sort of thing. And we get all sorts of weird and wonderful things to work on. Believe it or not, this is actually a device that was used to help make a medicine for animals. A very strange contraption. So in my job as an engineer, there's lots of different things that I end up doing. As I said before, sometimes I work on my own, other times I have to work as part of a team. I have to come up with new ideas for ways of trying to solve problems, maybe something that hasn't ever been done before. I get to build models and try and work out how to build them, get them built, and test new ideas by actually doing it themselves. This is one that was actually a part of a test for the wave energy device. So at the far end of the picture, that's actually me there pushing a paddle to make waves, and we could see whether it would actually work. I have to draw bits on the computer. Some of these can be really complicated parts to draw up, and then get parts made. As I said, sometimes we make them ourselves, sometimes we have to get other people to do it. But there's lots of different things that I end up doing as part of my job. So I've spoken a little bit about what I've done as a job, but I thought I'd just mention in general why I think engineers actually really important job to do. Because I think there's lots of really big challenges that we as people and as the world face, and these are some of the things that engineers are going to have to try and tackle. So things like climate change and the effects that that can have on the environment. So whether that's fires or floods, and also things like pollution in the seas. We're using up the resources of the earth, using up fossil fuels and materials. So we need to think of other ways of doing that. Things like renewable energy. We need to make sure everyone has enough food and water to drink. And people are living longer. We need to make sure that they're healthy and happy into their old age, and engineering can play an important part in that too. And another thing, I think probably in the next 20 years or so, we'll probably be wanting to travel a bit further into space. So there's lots and lots of engineers are going to be needed to try and solve these problems. And some of you in 20 years' time, as you're doing your job, might be trying to do some of these things. But we definitely need lots of engineers in order to do these, because these are real problems that we face. So finally, what do I like about engineering? Well, I like designing and coming up with new ideas and trying to solve really difficult problems. I like understanding how things work and trying to make new things as well. And the variety of work, all sorts of different projects that I get involved in, that makes my job really interesting, means it changes from day to day. And I also feel like I have a job that can make a difference, that I am trying to tackle problems that will make the world a better place. It's maybe only a small bit that I do, but if lots of people all make a little difference, then it will change things. So I hope I've been able to show you how I got into engineering, different types of jobs that are available and the different things that I've done as jobs, and also why I think engineering's not only important, but a good job to do. So if you have any questions, now's the time to ask them. Okay. Okay. If I right, right, just popping up now. Okay. Oops. Right. So that's questions starting to come through. What qualifications do you need to be an engineer? Oops. Well, I think, as I said, some people go off to university and study an engineering degree. Other people might do an apprenticeship, go straight from school. There's all sorts of different qualifications that could get you into engineering. While you're at school, probably the subjects that are most important are things like physics and maths, science subjects. Could you invent something to do the shopping or the cleaning? Do the shopping, that would be a good one. Well, I mean, there's people all around the world inventing all sorts of things all the time, and I'm sure cleaning's a big one. What's oh, they're really flying through. What's the best invention? I think the one that I've enjoyed working on the most that is probably the wave energy device, a renewable one. That's been my favorite one to work on. How long does it take to build a model? Well, that really depends. Some models are really simple and spend a few minutes building something, and that might be enough to tell us whether it works or it doesn't work. Other times it might take weeks or even months to build something really complicated. Like, for instance, the prototype of the device in Loch Ness, that probably took months to build. What's the sorry, that one just disappeared. Has your job got harder over time? I'm not sure if it's necessarily got harder, but it's definitely changed. There's different things that come along, and some things make it easier. So, for instance, I use computers all the time now, and that's made some of the work easier. But then there's also harder challenges to tackle using that. So some aspects are harder, some are easier. And what's your favourite part of my job now? Definitely having lots of different things to do, not just in terms of different projects to do, but different things. So some days I'll be sitting at my computer drawing something, the next day I might be down in the workshop building something. So having lots of different variety in my work's what I enjoy the most. What advice would you give to a new engineer? Well, I think really the big thing is that engineers are needed. There's lots and lots of jobs available for engineers, so it's a really good career to get into. Are you inspired by anyone? This question had been asked a few times, and it's funny, when I was growing up, there wasn't really an engineer that I looked at that inspired me to do engineering. And I think that's maybe one of the problems why there's not enough engineers around, that there isn't necessarily a famous engineer that I think people necessarily aspire to be like. There's one about pay here. On average, how much do the engineers get paid? Well, good thing is engineers do actually get pretty well paid. I'm not going to try and bring up the graphs, it'll take a while, but I do have a graph that shows how engineering compares to other jobs. It's probably one of the best paid jobs around, and there's also lots of jobs available, so it's actually a good one to get in from that point of view. But it's also worth mentioning that there's other aspects of my job, just more than pay, that's important to me. I have some flexibility of when I work. I can work from home as well, so these are all good things about my job as an engineer. What are the 3 biggest things you've ever made? Well, certainly the biggest thing was that the wave energy device. The one you saw there was actually only 1/10 the size of the final one. We made a slightly bigger one than that again, and that was, I mean, that would fill up your classroom easily. Do I prefer working in a team or on my own? Actually, sometimes it's nice to do a bit of both. Definitely, it's great. I've got a nice open office where there's people around me all the time to speak to and to ask questions and get their ideas. And a lot of the time we do have to work in groups, but sometimes it is also good to just get my head down and really think about a problem on my own and try and battle through a problem. So yeah, I guess a bit of both again. Oh, how old were you when you designed your first invention? I suppose, yeah, I probably enjoyed uh, doing things like building things with Lego or making things just at home. Yeah, even at primary school age. Um, Although I maybe didn't think about it at the time, that's the sort of thing that engineers do for the rest of their life. But yeah, building things with Lego is exactly the kind of thing. Making up new things that way is a great way of getting into it and getting a flavour for it. How many hours do you work? Well, I tend to work from about 7:30 in the morning through till 4 o'clock, which is maybe a bit earlier than some, but so I think that's about eight hours of work every day. So it's a bit longer than a school day, but quite normal for a job. How did you design tractors? Well, I mean, tractors are actually amazingly complicated machines that have all sorts of different things to them. And as I said, there were 60 people just in my office who were designing it. There were actually another office of about another 50 or 60 people, all designing tractors at the same time, different bits. So there are lots and lots of things to consider, and part of it was making sure that whatever I did would work for everyone else's parts as well. It was a really complicated part to try and all do at the same time. I've ever had a really tricky project that wouldn't work. I get this all the time where there's we try and come up with new ideas for things, and most of the time we can manage to make something work. But sometimes there are times where you try new things that you think will work and they don't. And definitely here we take the view that you just need to try something, build it, and if it doesn't work, then you just try a different idea. And most of the time, if you keep trying new ideas, you'll eventually get to a solution. Do I get to travel around the world with my job? Well, yeah, I've been quite lucky. I've traveled to quite a few different countries. I don't do lots and lots of traveling, but recently I was actually over in Australia testing one of our projects, which is used on farms at some farms in Australia. So I've been able to travel all the way to Australia for my work. Is being an engineer a hard job? I think actually it is quite a hard job. It's quite challenging. There's times where you've really got to think hard about something. Maybe there's a really difficult problem that's not easy to solve. Maybe it involves working with people that have different ideas to you and trying to maybe convince them that you think you know what to do, or having to be convinced by them. So there's definitely times where engineering is a difficult job and challenging, but also that can be good as well. If you've got a really difficult problem and you can manage to solve it, then that's a really satisfying part of work. How old were you when you became an engineer? Well, I suppose I finished studying at school and at university. I would have been I think 22. That was probably when I started working. But I suppose it depends when you say, when did I become an engineer? Because maybe even I was younger than that, I would have described myself as an engineer to some extent, even though I maybe didn't have the job title as an engineer. So what's the smallest thing I've ever made? It's difficult. Actually, sometimes really small things can be really tricky to make, just as much as big things can be difficult to make. I can't think what's the actual smallest thing. I know we've made some things just have one part in them. They don't have multiple parts, just have one part. It's probably some of the smallest. How long does it take from design to manufacture to produce a window? Well, I mean, just in general, not just with windows, it can take a long time to go from design through to manufacture and producing things. Sometimes it can be quick. We can get through it do a design project in a few weeks and get things made. we've got one project on at the moment that's been going for 9 years, and we're only just getting to the stage now where we're moving to actually manufacturing and making things. So depending what it is, it can take weeks or even years. Is it dangerous being an engineer? I don't think it's particularly dangerous, but I suppose it depends what you're working on. I mean, if you're working as an engineer, maybe on something like an oil rig, then there are dangers involved. My jobs tend to not be too dangerous. I'm mostly based in an office or a workshop, but I do have to take care. In the workshop, there's machinery that if I wasn't careful, I could injure myself on. Why is engineering important? Well, some of the challenges that I think that we face that I mentioned, things like climate change, renewable energy, all these things, they take engineers to work out what the solutions could be and how to actually make them. And if we didn't have anyone being an engineer, we might not be able to come up with good ideas for how to solve them. And even if we could come up with ideas, how would we make them and get them built? So engineers do all sorts of jobs to try and that can try and make our world a bit better for us all. Are you planning to move on to another area of engineering? I've not got any plans to do that at the moment. I like what I do, and I'd be happy to continue doing this for at least the time being. What's the hardest project? I think, well, to carry on with the wave energy, there were so many different aspects of that make it hard, but not least the fact that if you can imagine standing on a beach on a stormy day and seeing the waves crashing onto the shore, you see how strong the waves are. And that was one of the big problems with a wave energy generator, is all the force smashing onto these structures makes it really difficult to make them survive in the difficult weather. How long does it take to make a tractor? Well, I suppose it depends how long does it take. In terms of designing it all the way through to getting it built, probably took about 3 or 4 years to do that, from it first sitting on a bit of paper all the way through to one being made. But actually, for a tractor to be built on the production line, I think it probably only took about a day to go all the way around the production line. And actually in that factory, they made, I think, somewhere between about 100 and 150 tractors every day on their production line. What's the most difficult part of your job? I don't know. What's the most difficult part of a job? I suppose if there's a problem that we're really struggling with, and having to maybe go back to the company who've asked us to do it and say, you know, we've looked at it and we just can't come up with a solution. It's quite frustrating to have to go back and say, well, we've tried and we haven't managed. So maybe that's maybe one of the hardest things. If I had a choice, what would I really like to design or make? I think probably if I could do anything, I'd love to design a car. I think there's all sorts of different things you could do with a car nowadays in terms of how it would, not only how it would look, but even how it's actually moved. Is it a petrol car or electric car? There's all sorts of different things. So I think a car would be a great project to work on. The best part of my job, yeah, as I've mentioned, definitely having lots of variety of things, not knowing what I'm going to be working on tomorrow, that a new project might come in, something brand new that I've never done before, means that it's just constantly changing. I've always got lots of different things to do. How many electronic and non-electronic things have you made? Well, my speciality isn't so much with electronics and electrical side of things, so I tend not to do that so much, but I have some colleagues that I work with who are far better. But probably of the projects we do, at least half of them have some sorts of electronics in them that it's very common for products to have that in now. Would I like to travel in space? Yeah, I think I would love to travel in space if that was possible. I don't know if I'll get the chance in my lifetime to do it, but if I did, that would be a great thing to do. I think it would be amazing to see the Earth from space. What's the machine in the background? Well, actually, I could probably lift this up. we've got, oh, let's see if I can control this. Got some 3D printers on the go, printing off some some projects in the background. So we've got a few 3D printers here that are working away in the background. I hope they weren't too noisy. Do you build the motors or do you design them? I never actually designed the motors. We tended to get motors from someone else, but but excuse me, but to use them on things. If you weren't an engineer, what job would you do? Do you know, I really don't know what I would be doing if I wasn't an engineer. I know when I was really young, I wanted to be a footballer, but I know that I couldn't do that as a job because I'm not good enough. So I think it's just as well that I am an engineer. How many people, how much does it cost to create a prototype? Well, again, it depends what the prototype is. Sometimes we could make a prototype to test something that's maybe just a few bits of wood nailed together, and that's enough to show whether something works or not, in which case it only costs a few pence. Other prototypes we've made would have cost thousands and thousands of pounds. And sometimes you could spend all that and find out that something doesn't work, but that can still be really useful to know, just as useful to know what doesn't work and what does work. How many people work with you? The company I work for now has 10 people working for us, so that means it's quite a small company compared to some of the others. The place I worked at made windows, or around about 200 people work there, and the place that made tractors, there's I think about 30,000 people in total work there. So it's a much smaller company than before. Yeah, the machines behind that, something was typed up. So that's some, yeah, just maybe to mention them a bit more, there's some 3D printers, and that's something we use all the time now, that it's such a great resource for us. We can draw something on the computer and just immediately send it down to the printers. They sometimes take a few hours or maybe a day to print it off, but it means it's a really quick way of making things. What's been the quickest project? Yeah, probably the quickest project we'd ever do would take maybe a week or two, but that would be very, very short. Normally it takes a few months to do any sort of design project on something. What's the favorite thing that I've come up with? Yeah, well, so I suppose apart from the wave energy device, the bike, I really enjoyed working on the electric bike. It was because well, I like riding my bike as well, so it was something that I enjoy anyway. So getting to do that as part of a job seemed like really quite a good fun thing to do. How do you make an airplane? Well, I don't think I'd be able to make a proper airplane. I can make a good paper airplane maybe, but although I haven't ever made an airplane, I have been involved in a project that's made part of the wing on an airplane, and that's one of the new things that's come on is different materials that are used. So traditionally airplanes were made out of steel, maybe aluminium, so using metal, but nowadays they're starting to use plastics and carbon fiber, and we had to look at how you could join carbon fiber wings into the airplane, and we had to come up with a special tool that could be used to do that. Would I design a car? Well, I suppose the first thing I need to do before designing a car would be deciding exactly what it would be used for. So is it going to be a big family car, or is it something that would be used, maybe a smaller one to use around town for just one person? And what would be used to power it? So I'd probably have to think exactly what I wanted the car to be before I could then start thinking about what it would then be. And that's the same with any project that we do, is to actually before starting drawing things or coming up with ideas, is to decide exactly what it needs to be, and that way we can start to work out what it will be. What would I like to make in the future? I definitely like to do more renewable energy projects. I think that's a really worthwhile thing to do, and something that really interests me. How we can make more and more energy from renewable things like waves, like sun, wind, all these sorts of things. So I definitely like to be involved in some more of that. Have you ever failed when designing something? Well, yes, I fail all the time, and that's part of the process in designing is to fail. And actually, we'll do lots and lots of fails before we ever get to work getting something that works. But if something fails, not to just to say, well, that's it, it doesn't work, is to try and learn, well, why didn't it work, and what can I do differently next time to make sure that it does work. But no, whenever I do things, it's almost never going to work first time perfectly. So there's always failures. How many different things have you made? Oh, probably worked on um, 100 projects while I've been here, so all sorts of different things. I've lost count of how many different things I've made while I've been here. Have I made any toys? I actually don't think I have made any toys in particular. No, that's not something I've done yet. Would you ever work with Ford again? Well, if Ford ever came and asked us to do some car design, then I'd quite happily do that. As I said, that would definitely be something that would be great fun to work on. And what's been my favorite design so far? Well, one of the things that definitely sticks out was a few years ago now. We had to make the Queen's baton for the Commonwealth Games. So it's a little bit like the Olympic torch for the Olympic Games. When the Commonwealth Games were in Glasgow a few years ago, we were to design the baton, which was used for the Commonwealth Games. And so because that was something that was seen by lots of people, it was very much public, and actually it was a Queen's baton. It was handed to the Queen, so the fact that the Queen was our customer in that instance made it really quite a special project to work on. Do you need to design every single thing inside your project? Yeah. Well, yes. Sometimes it seems like it takes a long time to make even a very simple thing. You need to decide exactly everything that goes in it, every nut and bolt, and every single bit that goes in to make anything has to be decided upon, and it's there for a reason. So yeah, sometimes it seems like a trivial thing, something that's not that important, but if a screw's not there to hold it all together, it doesn't matter how good all the rest of the bits are. If it falls to pieces, then it's no use. Is it hard to design on the computer? Sometimes it can be, but generally the computer is there as a good tool to work on for doing really complicated things, and you can draw far more complicated things with lots of parts and a big assembly that would be really tricky to try and draw on paper by hand. So there can be times when it's frustrating, just like using a computer can be at any point, but mostly it's a really useful tool that makes my work easier. How many things have you made in the past few days? Well, actually, in the last few days, I probably haven't been down in the workshop very much. I have been working. I mentioned a project that's been going on for 9 years. So we're now at the stage of having to get lots and lots of parts ordered that we're going to assemble to be our first production run, where we might make a few thousand of things. So the last few days I've been ordering parts that we're going to start putting together. What kind of materials do you work with? Well, again, I'm kind of lucky in that I get to work with all sorts of things. I get to use metals and plastics and anything else, and really not limited by the material. And one of the things we would do very early in a design project is to try and work out, well, what is the right material to use? Is there something we've never used before? Do we need to find out more about it? And I've learned about all sorts of different materials just because they seem to be the right thing to use. There's so many different ways that you can make things, and different materials you can use. So any materials possible. have you made any friends at this job? Yeah, well, and not just where I work now, but in all the places I've worked, I've made friends. The colleagues I work with are people that I would consider friends as well. What's the lightest thing you've ever made? Oh, the lightest thing. And the heaviest thing, the heaviest, well, again, the heaviest one's easy, was definitely the wave energy, but it was by far the biggest and heaviest thing. The lightest one, um, oh, that's a tricky one. I'm not sure what would be the lightest. I might have to come back to that one. Uh, what's been your most successful invention? The most successful one. I suppose if I think of successful being it's gone and sold lots and lots. There's something that's used for a for that you might buy in B&Q. It's it's a tool to buy, and I think there's probably been millions of those sold. So something that we've worked on that's then gone on to sell millions and millions. That's really quite pleasing. So that's probably the most successful. What subjects did I study at high school? Yeah, so I studied. I did maths and physics and chemistry and computing, and also, well, it was called graphic communication or technical drawing. Those are sort of the main subjects I studied, and that's quite common for someone who wants to go into engineering. But actually, that's not to say that the other subjects aren't important. I had to do English, I used to do that, but I have to write reports for part of my job, and having done English, it helps with that. I have to do presentations, so any subjects can actually be useful as part of engineering. And just because if you don't necessarily have to be the best at these subjects, but if it's ones that you enjoy, you don't have to be necessarily be top of the class in maths to think that you need to, that you're going to be an engineer. If it's just something that you enjoy, that's good enough, and that might be enough to make you think that engineering's the job for you. What's the most common type of engineering? Oh, I don't know. Certainly mechanical and electrical engineers. They're probably the two most common. I would guess there must be, well, millions of engineers around the world. Do you use science, STEM? Yeah, those science, technology, engineering, maths are things I use every single day, and that's without them, engineering wouldn't be a thing. So I'm always using maths and engineering in everything I do. Sometimes it might actually be sitting and doing math sums, but other times it's just thinking in my head roughly how things need to be, and just knowing maths enough to do that is enough. What was the worst failure you ever experienced? What's the worst thing that's ever gone wrong? Again, that's a tricky one. I think I'm struggling to remember, because, as I said before, when things go wrong, I don't necessarily think of it as being a failure, as just, well, that didn't work, but how can I learn from it? So, as I say, things go wrong all the time, and it's not necessarily that's a failure or the end of the road, but just, well, it's something new I've learned, and how can I use that? So I'm not quite sure what's the worst thing that's ever gone wrong. Have you ever been injured while making something? No, I can't actually think of any time that I've been injured, any more than maybe hitting my thumb with a hammer. That's probably about the worst of it. Do you use blueprints in engineering? Do you know, I'm not actually even sure what the term blueprints means. I suppose it was an old term meaning how things were put together. I suppose it just schemes of how lots of things go together. Certainly, I would put together drawings of how parts go together, all the different parts fit inside assembly, and how they go together. So yes. Have I used a forge for anything? Oh, so that's, well, forging is a very specific manufacturing technique. Yes, we've had parts that have been forged, all sorts of different ways of making things, but forging is one that's it's a good good one for some metal. What we're working on now, yeah. So as I mentioned before, I'm working on a project. So this is something that's a tool that we used by farmers, farmers working with animals, and the idea is that this tool's hopefully going to mean that it can mean it's to give some pain relief to animals, so that when some of the things that they need done, it provides them with a better life. So we're hoping this will be a really good product that farmers will want to use. And which design took the longest? Well, funnily enough, that this one here, I don't think I've ever had anything go on for as long as 9 years, but it has actually taken that long to get to the stage we're at. Not necessarily been at it for every day for 9 years, but it has taken that long to get to the stage. So, but that's really long for something. What's your next project? I think the things that are lined up, we've got to make some containers that are going to be used for food. That seems to be the next thing that I'm going to be doing once I'm finished with this. I might start that in the next week or so. And did any of the parts fall off? Where are we? What's the fastest thing to make? Well, I suppose, as mentioned before, having these 3D printers behind it makes it really quick. If it's something small, I could draw it on the computer, and within an hour, I could have the part in my hand, which is really quite amazing, because before I would have had to maybe give a drawing to someone to go down to the workshop and spend a few hours making, or I could try and do it myself. Otherwise, I'd have to send it off to get made somewhere, which might take a few weeks. So to be able to make things draw up and make it in an hour or so, just makes things really, really quick. And that means that I can try things out quickly and learn so much in a really short period of time. Are you going to make new technology in the future? Well, I hope so. And I suppose the thing is, I don't know what that is yet, because if we knew what it was, then we'd do it right now. But I'm sure there'll be lots of new things that come up, things that we never even think of at the moment, that we'll have to work on. What was my first project? So the first project that I can really remember working on was actually the one that I mentioned right at the beginning, where I was working with Ford, looking at their factory where they made the engines, and for a first time, never really having properly seen a big factory before, to going to what must have been one of the biggest factories in the country, was really quite an eye-opener, and it was a great experience for me to see this huge factory and how it worked, and to try and understand how it worked. So it was really interesting to see this massive factory, and yeah, so looking at how they made their engines, how much it cost them to make engines, was probably the first project I can remember. What was the best bits of my career? Well, I think I've enjoyed all sorts of bits all through. So, when I was making tractors, what I really enjoy is, even though that was maybe 15 years ago, I might still be driving around and see a tractor, and I can point to the bit that I made, and it's still being used on tractors today. So it's quite nice to be able to go around and still see things that I've made, even from such a long time ago. And I can bore anyone that's with me about all the different aspects of it. What's my favourite subject in high school? I think definitely science, and in particular physics, but really all the science subjects are what I really what I really liked, and just what I was interested in. And I think that's probably the most important thing. If you're going to be working in a job for maybe 30 years, you want to be doing something that's interesting and that you like doing. So to choose something that's based around the subjects that you like doing, I think makes a lot of sense. So yeah, so for me it was science and physics, which got me into engineering. There's a few people signing off now. What tools does an engineer need? Um, Well, yeah, I guess it depends what the engineer is. So an electrical engineer will have all sorts of different tools that would be different to mechanical engineer or a design engineer. So for me, yeah, probably the computer is the biggest tool that I have, and probably actually a computer is the biggest tool that most engineers have. Um, that said, we've got access to a workshop down here with all sorts of different uh, tools, and uh, we've got machines for cutting metal. We've got 3D printers. We've got all sorts of things that I can use, but probably the computer is the most important one. What do you think is the most influential area? So industry, schools. Uh, so so if you mean by that, what's the most influential area to get people into engineering? Uh, I suppose really that the school is probably a great place to start teaching people about either engineering, well, all sorts of different jobs. But if if you can be thinking about what job you'd want to do, like engineering, whilst you're at school and get access to it, so whether it's through something like this or going to see companies, that's probably the best place to get some idea of a career. Where do you get different parts from? Um, well, from everywhere. Sometimes it depends. Sometimes I get them from just from lying around in the workshop if I just need a piece of wood or a bit of metal to try something on. But other times, if we need to order parts, just wherever we need to get them from. Uh, there's some places, some local places I know that I can get some things from, but otherwise I just have to find parts from wherever. And just recently I've had to order parts from China, I think from Australia as well. Just depends where they need to come from. Have I ever built a robot? Well, I suppose not a robot in the not a robot in the sense of one that looks a little bit like that, but I have made a machine that acts, I suppose, a little bit like a robot in that it has some parts that move by itself, and uh, when you ask it to do different things, it can move around. But it was used for a well, again, it's for me for making an animal vaccine. So this part had lots of different moving parts that came together to try and a bottle up and make this vaccine. And the reason it had to be done by basically by something that was like a robot rather than by a person is that it had to be done in a specially controlled environment so that no germs could get in. So you couldn't have people in and around touching the medicine. So it had to be done in an environment by lots of automatically controlled arms and wheels and things. So it was a little bit like a robot, I suppose. Uh, yeah, the most. How often do you get new projects to work on? I suppose typically over the course of a year, I might have 10 or 12 different projects that I work on. So maybe once every month there'll be something new. It might not be. I might get three all in one month that take a while, or not necessarily spread evenly out. But yeah, maybe once every month there might be something new that I haven't worked on before. Did you ever break your project, meaning you had to start over? Um, yeah, plenty of times we've started doing something and thought we were doing all the right thing and making things that worked, and then it found that it just wouldn't work properly that way, and kind of had to start at the beginning. But as I said, lots of times that get so many useful information from doing that, that it's you know, that's not necessarily a failure. Sometimes the fact that it's going to take a bit longer to do it can be tricky, but it's always, there's always something to be learned from it. What do chemical engineers do? Well, it's not something I know so much about, but what chemical engineers can do is work on lots of different materials. Certainly, I mentioned before the fact that there's so many different metals and plastics and rubbers and all sorts of materials to work on, and these are only around because chemical engineers have worked out how to make these materials, what properties they might have. So whether something's particularly might be really strong or really light, it might be great at stopping impact, so make something bulletproof, or so there's lots of different properties of materials that chemical engineers can discover and make new things that other engineers like me can pick up on. What jobs did you have before you were an engineer? Well, I've never done any real proper jobs other than engineering. So, when I left school, I went to university, and then from university straight on to being an engineer. But other than that, I have worked on a farm for a little while, just in the summer holidays. So that was my summer job while I was still at school. But no, other than that, I've only ever done engineering. How do you feel doing a project? Is it easy or hard? Would you do redo a project if you didn't like it? Well, it can be tricky because part of what I have to do is I have to decide how long I should spend doing something. I could spend years and years trying to make something perfect, but that might cost lots and lots of money. On the other hand, I could spend a little bit of time making it good enough, and that won't cost as much. So I have to try and balance how hard and how long to spend doing something against how important it is that it doesn't need to be perfect, or can it just be good enough? Because you could always spend a little bit longer. I could always start again and make it a little bit better. But at some times you just have to say, well, actually that's good enough, and we can use that as it is. And that can be a really tricky part, because to let something go when well, if I had longer to spend on it, I could make it better. I'm sure just like any of your projects, any of your homework, you could spend long enough doing it and making it good enough, or you could maybe have spent a bit longer doing it, but there's other things that you need to do as well. What's my favorite type of engineering? Well, I think I would describe myself as a design engineer now, but that's probably design, mechanical and design engineer. And those are my two favorite parts. I really like mechanical engineer, so trying to work out how things work, mechanisms, how things go together, and these are all types of things that a mechanical engineer does. So those are the bits that I really enjoy doing. What do you make with a 3D printer? All sorts of things, but mainly what we would do is use it to test things out. So the 3D printer is great from some respects, and it can be really quick, but on the other hand, the materials that it uses, it's not always the best. It's a plastic material. It's not necessarily the strongest. So we can use them to test things, to see if they work, if they fit together. But it might be that after we've printed it on the 3D printer, the next thing we have to do is make it in a different material in a different way. But by then we'll know that at the very least they work and the parts go together, rather than spend lots of time and money making bits that we wouldn't know whether they would even fit together. So yeah, we tend to make lots of first tests of parts to see how they look, how they go together. A few people saying they have to go. How much metal do you recycle when making a car? Is it easy to make all your projects when you're alone? How much metal do you recycle making a car? Well, I know nowadays when car makers are having to make their cars, they have to think about not just how they go together and what they're made of, but what will happen when the car's finished its life, and how it will be recycled. So I think a lot of cars that are built now will be able to be recycled. We'll be able to take the metal parts and plastic parts apart and separate them out and reuse them. And is it easy to make all your projects when you're alone? It can be really hard to do things on your own, which is why I guess my office is set up the way it is, that if I am ever having trouble with something, I can just look around me and find some people to ask, and they can help come up with a solution if I'm getting stuck. What we've got here, a few people leaving. The most colourful thing you've ever made. Wow, the most colourful thing. Well, I suppose well, probably actually the one thing about the again, looking at the 3D printers is the different colors of material. We can actually print things in lots of different colors. Excuse me. And well, that can be really useful at when trying to work out how things go together, where they go apart. If we've got lots of different parts, but I can print them in lots of different colors, it makes it easy to see where all the parts are and which parts go where. So probably using the 3D printers to print off things in lots of different colors is the most colorful thing. And what's the most boring thing we've ever made? I think, no, the thing is, even things that seem quite boring, when you actually have to consider all the things that go into them, like I say, things like materials and how they'll be made, it does actually get interesting. I mean, I never had any particular interest in windows. It wasn't something I ever thought I would enjoy looking at, but by really understanding how they're made and what materials and all the intricacies that go into actually making them, I think even the most boring thing can start to become interesting. So I don't think I've ever worked on anything that's just really boring and I've just had no interest in. There's always something interesting about something.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, John. Some great questions there that as well.
Yeah, they were really, really good questions this time.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, guys, I think we're going to have to close the call today now. It looks like all the questions have finished and we're well past 2:30. Right. So on behalf of all the schools and primary engineer, thanks a lot, John. Brilliant. Okay. Again, the bits I heard were all brilliant. Okay. and thank you to all the schools who are still on. Did that just go again there? Right. If anyone has any feedback, please do email me to let me know. And because we always love to hear some feedback. And thank you all very much. So what I'm going to do, it says here, seize back, reclaim host. So I'm going to reclaim the host, and then I'm going to close the meeting down. Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks, John. And I'll drop you an email too, John, yeah? Okay, right. Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.